his board of directors. But I'm going to allow Norman to just kind of tell a little bit about himself. I went from A&M into this new role, and we don't have a lot of times, and we have a lot to talk about. So, Norman, go ahead and give us a quick overview of the commission, and then we'll go into some of your recent success in the last couple of weeks.
Great, thank you. Absolutely. Good morning. And I'm glad to be here. Obviously, the team here at White Texas has got the right kind of mentality and trying to get the right group together and the topics around Texas, and that's why I'm here to tell the story about the Texas Space Commission. I've been in a lot of places. I was in Laredo last weekend, D.C. last week, time down in Houston, of course, as well, but getting around Texas to tell this story. So that's why I'm here, and I want to thank the White Texas Group for including Joseph and I on the program. Let me give you a little background in terms of why the Texas Space Commission was created. But first, I'm going to ask a question. How many people even knew that the Texas Space Commission was in existence?
Good. All right. Did they read the news?
I was going to say, and or maybe they did the read ahead of the agenda and such here. So
both count.
Good class. Both count class, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, NASA headquarters in D.C. starts talking about a word that has become much more of a household known name today. But then it kind of wasn't. The word was Artemis. And that's the mission to return to the moon. And it's got a couple of purposes. It's not just the inspirational aspect to try to make sure that the 5-year-olds to the 80-year-olds are excited again, but it really has a nexus to national defense. The Texas Space Commission has 3 main elements: commercial aerospace, civil aerospace, and military aerospace. And that's why the 9 people that Joseph referenced, who were vetted and appointed as the board of directors for the Texas Space Commission, 3 by the governor, 3 by the lieutenant governor, and 3 by the House Speaker, includes some really impressive, incredible people. They aren't your typical political appointees. They are folks with extensive experience when it comes to space, and their expertise is bar none, in Texas especially. Let me tell you about a few of them. The board chair, her name is Gwen Griffin. She's from the Clear Lake area. Her father worked at Johnson Space Center for many, many years, so it's in her blood, in her DNA. She's not an engineer, she's not a scientist or an astronaut, but she is a communicator. And in her day job, she represents companies and associations, as well as STEM-related groups that all focus on space. The vice chair of our board, another female, her name is Kathy Leaders. She runs Starbase for SpaceX down at Boca Chica Beach outside of Brownsville. We have a former astronaut, retired Army colonel, aviator, PhD, Nancy Curry Brett. We have some venture capitalist folks that have been giving out their own money and others when it comes to the aerospace innovation ecosystem for a number of years. Brad Morrison and Evan Loomis. We also have folks from Boeing and Lockheed. And we have a former Secretary of the Air Force, current president of the University of Texas at El Paso, Dr. Heather Wilson. You can just imagine her Rolodex. While she was the SecDef, she was working on the basing decision for what was first starting to become the U.S. Space Force. I told you that those 3 main priorities of the Texas Space Commission per statute by the Texas legislature is commercial, civil, and military aerospace. There is a lot of focus and attention on the kind of technology, research, and workforce that's necessary to support this industry in Texas that all has to come back to the conversation of national defense. I'm going to pause there. I know we got much more to go through, but I wanted to highlight the people and the purpose of the Texas Space Commission.
Yeah, and thank you. I want to double stomp on the idea that's about national security at the end of the day. He who controls space controls so much that in our everyday lives we may not even appreciate. Just wait till your GPS stops and you're at a place you don't know, then you're going to appreciate. Credit card doesn't work and so on. And that comes from somebody who is 20 years Army, and so I appreciate that as well. But let me shift gears a little bit because, as Ed and the team at Wide Texas are focusing so much on education for this conference and opportunities, one of the missions that Texas Space Commission has is to work very closely with TARSEC, and you go around to different parts of the state talking about partnering with the university. I had the pleasure of attending and speaking at the latest TARSEC, the one that was in Austin, hosted by the University of Texas. So explain from an education standpoint that role. You're looking at workforce and doing around job training and skills.
Yes, sir. Thanks. So I described to you all the 9-person board of directors appointed by the governor, like Gov, and the House Speaker. It's 9. That's our governing body. They have fiduciary oversight of a grant program that I'll talk about in a moment as well. But to Joseph's point, currently, I also have a separate set of 9 that is an advisory consortium. They are a non-governing entity, and they too were appointed by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the House Speaker, as well as a designee from the UT System Chancellor's Office, the designee from the A&M System Chancellor's Office, and a designee from the Rice President's Office. Rice, everybody kind of eyebrows up. Why? Remember this guy named Kennedy that made this speech?
Pretty famous one.
In their football stadium? Exactly. Right down the road from what today we know as Johnson Space Center. There is still a lot of presence that Rice is doing, or has rather, in that Houston area when it comes to space in particular. So they're at the table as well. And it's that academic nexus for this consortium that aren't a governing body, who don't have oversight of the fund, that is the eyes and ears for the Texas Space Commission Board of Directors. I describe them as the knight in shining armor because they're not subject to the Open Meetings Act, of which my board absolutely hates because they all come from industry, not for government, and they like to make decisions yesterday. But we have some good lawyers making sure that we do it properly, of course. Secondly, we also have a very robust conflict of interest process because of our board members' experiences and expertise and their backgrounds. They've all overlapped at some point in time. They all know the same people, whether in DC or around the world, when it comes to space. And so as they're going through their responsibilities of administering that $150 million grant fund, as well as identifying the strategic initiatives for the state of Texas writ large, there's a lot of overlap, and sometimes that's good, but we also have to do a lot of deconflicting. But TARSEC is a group that was appointed, but every institution of higher education in Texas, whether that's a 2-year or 4-year, is eligible per statute to give a local liaison or name a local liaison to TARSEC as their representative, seat at the table, participate in the conversation, and attend these workshops that Joseph was referring to. They've held 3 to date: Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. There's planning underway currently for calendar year 25 to have some up here in North Texas, down in the Valley, out West Texas, up in the Panhandle, etc. And the purpose is so that industry and academia can describe for TARSEC what is underway today so that the board has a good understanding of what assets and capabilities are out there. And then we can also identify gaps and opportunities, whether that's from industry or from the feds or otherwise. So that's very important. Hopefully everybody pays attention, goes both to our website, space.texas.gov, signs up for our distribution list, click the link to get over to TARSEC and learn more as well.
Yeah, and every time I see Norman, I reminded me, he has literally the coolest website in the world. Just the domain name, Texas, space.texas.gov. That's awesome. So one of the other things that Kennedy said in that speech is that we're going out because it is easy, but because it is hard. And he alluded to the fact that working with industry can be sometimes hard because they have to work with government and vice versa. But one of the things that you're doing very deliberately, especially with this $150 million grant fund that you have, are identifying organizations, profit, nonprofit, as well as private companies that are in this space. You've had 2 rounds, check my map, 2 rounds, one with the West Texas, El Paso, and a couple other communities, and then this latest round with the 5 different companies. And when you talk about competition that people put in their money where their mouth is, so I was thrilled to see the last round, 3 companies are in the Capital Factory Fund, which if you don't know Capital Factory, it's a incubator venture capital group that I'm an investor in. So I was really thrilled to see those 3 companies. But tell us a bit more about what that looks like when you are thinking about the criteria, you're awarding this money, what your expectations are, and how that goes forward. Because anybody in this room could apply.
Hopefully they did, because the application period ended on January 21st.
There you go. I hope you apply.
Yep, just small qualifier there. So the application period was open from September 13th, 2024 to January 21, 2025. Within those 4 months, we received 281 applications from 140 unique entities around the state of Texas. The collected total of all of their proposed projects is $3.46 billion, and we have $150 million. So thankfully, I'm not an evaluator, but the 9 people on our board had been diligently going through all of those applications. Let me explain to you how folks were eligible to apply and what their proposed projects needed to accomplish. Per statute, the floor in terms of minimum requirements is that the entity, be that private company, governmental entity of which institutions of higher education are defined, or nonprofits, must have an existing presence in Texas. This is not meant to help attract people necessarily. Right now, the fund is to help those that are already here. But I'm going to expand on that in a minute. Then, or left and right, if you will, is that the proposed project had to satisfy one of 5 categories. And they were broadly defined in statute intentionally. Research and development in terms of aerospace or space flight activities, emerging tech, post-mission curation, think things coming back to Earth from outer space, infrastructure support for the spaceports in Texas or the areas that are helping to develop that kind of a presence in Texas. And I'm having my Rick Perry moment of the day for 5th, but there are 5 as our left and right. The ceiling is that there could be as many proposed projects as any one entity wanted to submit, and there was not a cap in terms of the most amount of money that they might ask for. So that kind of helped drive why we received, I believe, so many applications. But here's what it did. It created a demand signal. We understood from across the state of Texas who wanted to propose these major projects, these big ideas. And our application was not your typical RFI, RFP, RFQ with 1 billion questions and 1,000 pages. It was, I think, less than 20, and about 7 of those is all of the legal garbly-goop, if you will, and then a limited number of actual questions for folks to respond. Our board of directors, they have a pretty low BS bar because they've been doing this for a while, so they asked that we as staff include on the application the requirement of responses to be less than 100 words. You know, it's sometimes harder to write shorter than it is longer, but they wanted to quickly understand what the big idea was and not have to go through 1,000 slides, et cetera, although supplemental material, of course, was received and letters of support, et cetera, et cetera. So I told you that the application period opened September 13th. We also had to write rules, send those over to the Secretary of State's office to get them published in the Texas Register and then promulgate them. So it actually wasn't until right before Christmas that the board could legally start looking at applications that met the conflict of interest eligibility by our chief compliance officer. So they spent time over their Christmas and New Year holiday evaluating applications, which is how we eventually got to have a meeting in January and issue those first 4 awards that was $21.5 million. And then they continued, kind of like a rolling admission at universities or colleges, to see more and more applications as they hit their digital portal. And we were able to get to that second round just a few weeks ago. Blue Origin, SpaceX, Intuitive Machines, Starlab, and Firefly, big brands here in Texas that are doing major things when it comes to innovation for space, were those recipients. And collectively, the board awarded $47.7 million for those 5 entities just a week and a half ago. It was perfect timing because my board chair and I, Gwen Griffin, who I was telling you about, her father, flight director, mission control, Johnson Space Center, blah, blah, blah. We were going straight out to DC last week for 2 major industry conferences. We also got to see Dr. Brian Babin, congressman from the Houston area, chair of the committee with oversight of NASA. We also got to see Senator Cruz from Texas, chair of the committee of oversight for NASA from Texas. We got to meet also the current acting administrator for NASA, Janet Petro from Florida. She is the former site director for Kennedy Space Center. And we took Governor Abbott to meet her. So there could not be a better stars aligning and leadership support across the board for space when it comes to Texas's positioning of what's next, which is why everybody in this room needs to be part of the conversation, or the risk is you'll get left behind.
True. Yeah, so that's a great segue. So one of the other reasons why I was thrilled that Ed invited me to participate in this time with Norman is, so since my days literally in college as an aerospace engineer, wannabe astronaut, and doing an internship at NASA Ames, I recognize the power of that inspiration to want to be in space. However, there's a lot of people who could be working in the space industry that don't know it. So here at Texas, we founded the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas. It's to find the electricians, it's to find the plumbers, it's to find all the people to actually physically build the rockets and spacecraft. So we think of the engineers that design it, but the people that actually build it are another breed, and they require a special set of skills. So what was the name SWIFT, and we put Texas at the end, is we plan to change that T maybe to T for technology because we want to go nationwide. So you teed it up. We have so much special connection to leaders in DC, from Space Force to all the new initiatives. What can this room do to think about what they can say to their local representatives, be city, state, or especially federal, to be able to give the signal that Texas is open for business in space, and what more they can do, kind of partner with you in that, coming from industry or academia?
Sure, thanks. Good question. So I'm a state employee, so I can inform and educate, but not advocate. But what hopefully those here in the room can do is take some of this message onto those ears that are helpful at the end of the day. So I think most folks here are interested in the pipeline of a well-prepared workforce. So here's a couple of ideas. Not only is it those kind of jobs that Joseph was just describing that are super important, but it's also finding the right person that has the passion and also possibly the opportunity to hold a security clearance so that they can go work on major projects. I believe that every institution of higher education in Texas should have somebody to help those students who know they want to go into this market determine whether or not they're the right fit to try and start that process for a security clearance before they graduate. Because then if they get hired by one of those big brands, they're in the room and they can start listening to the needs and apply their skills, whether it's a technical skill or an advanced degree, to try and create that next kind of technology that's required to literally send things from this dirt to outer space. Because the stuff that happens in outer space is really what the opportunity is for the rest of us mere mortals that will never leave Earth. It's the kind of manufacturing that you can do in zero gravity, or the kinds of things that you can grow, whether it's biotissue, speaking of the room next door is having that conversation from the medical perspective, or software and hardware like fiber optics and such that just has much more durability and efficacy in zero gravity. And if all of that can be experimented up in zero gravity, then it is applicable to the rest of us here on Earth for things that we need to enjoy our way of life. Those are all civil and commercial type things, but there's a lot of that advanced technology and innovation that is also applicable to the military side. We were talking about how there's a nexus to the national defense and homeland security missions, and the other thing that folks can take to ears and eyes up in DC is the need to grow the Space Force. The Space Force now is getting shifted, lots of responsibilities that had been under Army or Air Force, etc., over the past decades, and it's important that they're able to grow. Just like most companies and state agencies, there's a cap in which the rate Space Force can grow, and it needs congressional action and authority to have that limit raised. And then what hopefully can happen is this sort of circular pathway for the right kind of individuals. Say a student wants to join the Space Force, but then eventually leave and come back to industry, or vice versa, or just partner in some form or fashion on those major technology contracts that these companies have. We need them to be able to grow faster. We need the companies to have the nexus to them, and we need the workforce to be able to hear what those needs are with the right credentials and potentially even security clearances as well.
Yeah, and I think our first panel this morning really kicked that off of the difference. In the 19th and 20th century, educators wrote curriculum, handed students and graduates over to industry and said, good luck. But as the challenge was put forward this morning, which is how do we flip that and have industry better at the table to provide those signals? So let's talk about another table. I recently saw a press conference and comment on what you can or can't, but there was an initiative by the governor and others to try to lure 4 military headquarters here in the space world. In case you don't know it, the military's newest 4-star command, Army Futures Command, is right here in Texas, down in Austin. It attracted, like large industry does, lots of other groups around them. In fact, they were preceded by the Air Force, AFWorks, as well as the Defense Innovation Unit. So there's now 17 different military organizations that have moved to Texas in the last 5 to 6 years. And I believe the governor and others are also advocating for another Space Force headquarters. Do you have any insider information or anything publicly available we can know?
Sure, so it's not a secret, and if he were here, the governor would tell you that he is very aggressive in wanting to attract the attention from the U.S. Space Force to consider a basing decision somewhere in Texas for what hopefully is their newest command, which should be called Space Futures Command, very similar to Army Futures Command. Colonel retired Ross Gibb here was the XO to the first commanding general Murray when that post came to Austin, Texas. So Texas has played this game before. We know how to position the whole state to attract the DoD interest for a presence or an expanded existence of those different operators here in Texas. Right now, there's a limited presence when it comes to Space Force, particularly its Space Systems Command, which is headquartered at LA Air Force Base in California. Out in El Paso, with Dr. Wilson's contacts and her wearing her UTEP president's hat, she had a CRADA executed, so she has a few Guardians over there. There's also a few Space Force Guardians.
Oh, do you want to clarify what a Guardian is for those that don't know?
Army has soldiers, there are Marines, all of the different
Sailors.
Right, all the different war fighters from each branch. For Space Force, they're called Guardians. So there's some out in El Paso, and there's some attached to NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, and they sit at Ellington Field, which is just down the road. Ellington Field, sidebar, happens to be one of the 2 publicly designated FAA spaceports, in Texas. Does anybody know where the other one is? Typically crickets.
Yeah.
Midland, Texas. Midland, Texas is the other FAA designated public spaceport in Texas. Midland should be on everybody's radar. They have a Spaceport Development Corporation, and they are helping to position their local community to be the location for some satellite manufacturing companies. Y'all might have also read or heard about the city of Arlington up here at DFW also positioning themselves to be the location for a satellite manufacturing company. Different communities around the state of Texas, as I travel, I encourage them to figure out what part of the commercial space ecosystem they want to own. Do you want to own launch like South Texas? Do you want to own return like maybe what West Texas could do? Do you want to own manufacturing, what like Midland and Arlington is trying to position themselves to be? Do you want to own lunar landing like what Central Texas is trying to do? What is it that your region would like to do? The Texas Space Commission is not going to come to every part of the state and tell them what to do. We're going to ask what you would like to do, and then let's figure out how we can work together to make that happen. I was just in Laredo last weekend. I was in El Paso before that, and quickly conversation turned to the challenge of being so far away from places like the DFW Metroplex. And the fact that up here there's a lot of those legacy aerospace companies that are a location for students to do internships, as an example, or mentorships. So I quickly turned it around on them and said, don't tell me about the challenge of y'all being so far away. Tell me about the opportunity that you're going to create and invite those companies to come set up shop somewhere in your local community for the summer and offer a 6-week or a 12-week internship so that your students actually gets put on their resume. They did do a Boeing internship. They just did it in Laredo, Texas. They didn't have to come all the way to DFW or vice versa. So there might be companies that aren't located up here that your students want to have access to. Intuitive Machines, Firefly, etc. Give them a room in a building like this and let them be a mentor to a cohort of students over the summer, and then they get a letter of recommendation or a certificate. They can put it on their website or their resume, etc. So invert that challenge, create an opportunity, help to solve for the gap, and let's really make this an opportunity at the end of the day for students that hopefully are eventually hired. I think I got so off track on that.
No. He actually, I segue. So first of all, shameless plug, on that partnership with industry and with community colleges, that's what swiftrockets.org, that's our website, swiftrockets.org. We have partnerships around the state, and we're getting money to student rocket organizations, and I would love to see more of you join that organization. But I just got the signal, we've only got 2 minutes. So I'm gonna give this question back to you, 2-part, take each, whichever one you want. One is, what does it mean to have the support of the Texas legislature that created this? How can this room reach out to their local state representatives and say, we want more of that, we see return on investment? Or talk about the idea of partnering with other states from Florida all through the Gulf Coast to Texas to create an unbelievable alliance. Whichever one you want.
I'm going to try to do both in 2 minutes.
Okay.
The first, Governor Abbott, if he were here, the first question that he would ask the room is, what word did everyone on Earth hear when folks landed on the moon? What was the word that everybody heard?
Houston.
Houston. So, whether it's the moon, whether it's further or otherwise, what needs to occur is the presence of Texas in zero gravity or on the lunar surface as the next major innovation, period. So the first part of the question, if I remember it correctly, is I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to tell the story of what they want to do for space when it comes to speaking with your state legislators specifically. And this isn't a plug for more money just for the Texas Space Commission. I can make the argument that we should get another 150 because that's what's in our fund today. I can make the argument that it should be 350 because that's really what was earmarked last session. I could also make the argument that $500 million, $750 million, or $1 billion is the right number because of that demand signal of all of the applications that we've received to date. But it's really, and others said it on the stage earlier, a matter of rowing the boat collectively together in the same direction. So maybe it's money for space to the Workforce Commission, or to TEA, or to DPS, or to TxDOT, all of these different, or to universities and colleges. In this regard, it's the whole state moving the ball in the same direction when it comes to the commercial space ecosystem. I probably should stop there.
Well, 30 seconds on the Gulf Coast Consortium. Thanks.
Yeah, so Texas has a multi-state compact when it comes to water and energy. Water because of the Colorado River, energy because of our connectivity to the 2 grids outside of Texas. But there's also a concept that Texas ought to contemplate establishing a multi-state compact on space and doing such with all of the Gulf Coast states first. There's other states like California and Colorado and Virginia that are going to want to be part of that quickly. But here's what that kind of consortium or multi-state compact could do. It allows us to more self-regulate rather than be subject to the multiple federal agencies that get in the way when it comes to launch operations or return or high-altitude hypersonic test corridors between, for example, West Texas and the Houston region, or the Houston region and South Texas, because it's those kinds of technologies that's necessary, certainly for rocket launches, but also applications to what you and I maybe one day will fly in, which is a hypersonic airplane. Remember the Concorde that moved at supersonic speed. There's technologies out there under development today to help an engine move the public around at hypersonic speeds. So if that multi-state compact were in existence, Texas and those other states could do some self-regulation and bypass things like the FAA standards or NEPA or US Fish, et cetera, that kind of get in the way sometimes or drag their feet, as you might imagine, when it comes to red tape from the feds. So thanks.
And so hopefully you can tell by our excitement how bullish we are both on the Texas space industry, both for commercial, civil, and national security. And the team at Y Texas want to thank you for having us, and more importantly, help me thank Norman for being here today.
We will take